Hi everyone, this is Sarah, and I did say I would do some videos to help out with the Lily Pond crochet along. This stitch will be the double crochet if you are using UK terminology, or it's called a single crochet when using American terminology. I have a chain of 13 here at the moment. I'm going to complete 12 stitches into this chain. One of the chains is classed as a turning chain, but I'll explain that later on in the video. So we're going to continue to start this row. So the first chain from the hook is the turning chain, so we're going to enter the second chain from the hook to start this row. So I'm going to place my hook in the chain, yarn over hook, pull up one, gives us 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 2, and I just give it a little tug sometimes so that the stitch lies nice and flat. At this point a tip might be to place the stitch marker on the very top of this particular stitch. This is your last stitch on the return row. I'm having a bit of bother getting it in. And sometimes some people find it difficult to identify this stitch on a return journey. This stitch marker just helps you to identify that and can make it a little bit easier. This stitch quite often gets missed out, which is why sometimes some work doesn't end up being nice and square. So that's our first stitch completed, and our stitch marker is in there to identify that stitch on our return journey. So I'm going to continue along the row to do our doubles. So into the next chain, pull up 1 loop, yarn over, pull through 2 to complete. Into the next chain, pull up 1, collect the yarn again, through the 2 to complete. Insert your hook, pull up 1, yarn over, through 2. So at this point we now have 4 completed stitches. If I tilt the work slightly, you'll see this nice V across the top that looks very much like your chain. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 complete stitches, and the stitch itself looks like a little V underneath. So just continue into the next chain, pull up 1, yarn over, through the 2, and I'm just going to continue to the end so you can see the completed row. In this particular video I'm using chunky yarn and a 6mm hook, and this is just so that you can hopefully see as best as possible what I'm doing. I appreciate that there's shadows and it's not always the easiest thing to identify when you've got fingers in the way. Just a little tip at this point, I've got 12 stitches, so we'll count those. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. If you can see here where the slip knot is, there's a small hole identified where I've inserted the hook for the final stitch. A handy hint is to make a slip knot so that this little tail here is the piece of yarn that closes that slip knot, and if I just give it a tug you'll see that that little hole disappears. If you have the slip knot closing with the working end, unfortunately you wouldn't be able to close a hole should one appear. At this point we've finished 1 row, and now we need to make a turning chain to do the return journey. For single crochet, if it's US terminology, double crochet in UK terminology, it's 1 chain. and as you can see it creates a little bit of height, and that makes sure you have a nice straight row. So at this point we flip the work over to do the return row. Often with double crochet the turning chain does not count as a stitch, but I haven't read the pattern, so we'll have to wait till it come out to see what the pattern actually says. But for the purposes of this demonstration I'm not going to use the turning chain as a stitch, and I'm going to insert my hook in the very first stitch of the row. I'm going to pull up 1, yarn over through 2, and just a little tug to make sure that stitch is right. And again, once complete, use a stitch marker to mark the top of that very first stitch, which becomes the last stitch on your return journey. If you give your work a little tug, you can sometimes see a hole identified underneath the top of the row, and that is exactly where you need to insert your hook when you're doing the return. So we're going to put our hook in the next stitch along, pull up 1, yarn over through 2, insert your hook, pull up 1, yarn over through 2, and we'll just do exactly the same all the way across to the other side. Coming towards the end there now. I'll just count these stitches so you can see that that does identify the last one. So the first one is with this stitch marker. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Where the stitch marker is, you just need to insert your hook. You can leave the stitch marker in, yarn over, pull up 1, yarn over through 2. This stitch marker can now be removed. It will no longer serve a purpose, and you can see that we have a nice straight edge to our piece of work. So in preparation for the return journey I'm going to chain 1 for the turning chain and flip the work. And again identify the first stitch, pull up 1, yarn over through 2, and again if you're not confident with finding that last stitch, just use the stitch marker to help identify it, and then continue along the row as before. Insert hook, pull up 1, yarn over through 2. So here we have 2 completed rows of 12 double crochet plus the 4 that I've just done across the top there. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to be doing some videos on half trebles, trebles and double trebles. So I hope you found this useful. Thank you, bye!